First thing to know about Indonesian food is American food is boring. We don't believe in flavor like Indonesians do. You may have heard of the Spice Islands that were this huge trade thing. If you've seen one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, they talk about the East India Trading Company. And that was a company created in England that had more power than most countries because they controlled the spice trade. And these infamous Spice Islands, that's Indonesia. There's a lot of rice in their diet. You will rarely go for a meal without having rice. Kind of the main food groups are rice, chicken, fry oil, and spice. The Indonesian word for spicy food is pedas, and they love to throw that stuff on everything. Some of my favorite dishes, it's called nasi uduk and tempe goreng. And nasi means rice. But nasi uduk is rice that instead of being cooked in water, it's cooked in coconut milk and lemongrass. So it has this really sweet flavor to it. And then tempeh is, this sounds disgusting, but it's an acquired taste and it's a good one. Tempeh is fermented blocks of soybean. It's like this brick of soybeans that's been like fermented and grouped together, and then they'll chop that up into strips and fry it. First time you have it, it's like, this tastes kind of weird, but once you have it a couple times, oh, it's so good and rich in protein. A lot of the places you eat are street vendor carts, or they have these things called warungs, which they're little restaurants off to the side of the road. You'll go in and it's kind of like buffet style. They'll get their paper packaging ready. They throw on some rice and it's like, okay, which of these do you want? And there's all sorts of different dishes, various types of fried potatoes, meat, sauces, tempeh, varying from like really juicy meat all the way up to like so hot with the spice that you'll be weeping tears for the next 6 days. A lot of variety in the food, a lot of wonderful dishes, and a lot of rice. Oh man, I'm getting hungry. I remember my first memory getting off the plane in the airport was just getting hit with this wave of humid air and immediately being drenched in sweat and going, okay, this is what it's going to be like for 2 years. I can either suffer or just choose not to care. And I went, okay, I'm just not going to care. And I never really had much of an issue getting annoyed by the sweat or the humidity after that. It was great. And I remember just being like overwhelmed with the craziness of the city. Here in the US, you see a motorcycle like for every 1,000 cars or so. Over there, it's like 10 to 15 motorcycles for every car you see. So motorcycles, scooters, they're everywhere. And it all just kind of like flowed, the traffic as we went. No one really followed rules. The stoplights were more like guidelines, but it all still just held together in this really cool flow. A never-ending game of chicken is how traffic works over there. We popped on one of the transport buses, which it's usually like as many people crammed inside as you can get, with some guy leaning out the edge screaming, hey, get on this bus, this is where it goes, this is where it goes. I just remember like being crazy overwhelmed, like I'm supposed to be able to deal with all this, I'm supposed to be able to understand all this. It's a wild introduction. It's definitely a different place, but it's an adventure too. Take Pepto-Bismol. Get the chewable tablets. It doesn't matter how many you take, it will not be enough. It is almost inevitable that you're going to get some sort of parasite or foodborne illness eating in Indonesia. You just kind of live with it. I mean, I had parasites the entire time I was there, and there was only one time where it actually bugged me enough to where I had to had to take some medication to deal with the parasite. And they give you parasite killing drugs when you come home, so you're fine once you get back. Content warning, some people may find this gross. But one of the big side effects of parasites is that you get a lot of upset stomach and diarrhea. The first 9 months of my mission, I did not pass a solid stool. I was constantly having diarrhea. So take as much Pepto-Bismol as you can carry. It will save your gut when you've got those stomach aches or really bad diarrhea. Another big thing is it does rain a lot in Indonesia. You're going to want to take a heavy-duty umbrella. Don't skip out on that, and don't buy it over there. Surprisingly, they don't make very durable umbrellas in Indonesia, or if they do, they ship them to the United States. You would think that they would have better umbrellas there because it rains so much. But there will be rain, there will be winds. You want to take a really heavy-duty umbrella in order to deal with that, and you also probably want to take a heavy-duty poncho if you can find one. The currency of Indonesia is called the rupiah. When I was there, it fluctuated from 8,000 rupiah to $1 up to 12,000 rupiah to $1. Us Americans really liked it when it was 12,000 rupiah to $1 because we got banked with the conversion rates. It was awesome. You can usually get a meal, but for the most part, averages out to about 10,000 rupiah for $1. So that's what I would use when equating costs. Cost of living there is really inexpensive. A ridiculously expensive meal. Okay, not like posh top tier gourmet restaurants, but like normal person going to a nice expensive restaurant could be about 25,000 rupiah, which is 250. One of my favorite places was this. It's called Warung Steak. It's a steak and shake, and you could get 2 country fried steaks with gravy and vegetables, and a milkshake for $1.50. I rarely had a meal that cost more than 10,000 rupiah. So for $1, you can get wonderful, delicious, filling meals. If you start getting into like eating a lot more chicken or meat, then it does start getting a little more expensive. But most things were cheaper than that. With housing, the annual rate that we agreed to for this one house was 8 million rupiah, which is about $800 to $900 for the apartment where we were staying for a year. So cost of living is definitely on the lower end. Most of the buses are on coach you ride will be between 2,000 rupiah up to most expensive being about 5,000 rupiah. So a quarter to 50 cents is usually what you pay for transportation. Jakarta was really nice because they had the busway. And you can get off at any station of the busway, transfer it to a different bus line without having to pay again. So you can pay the 35 cents to get on the busway and ride an air-conditioned bus for 4 or 5 hours. Indonesia as a country came into being at the end of World War II. Up for about 300 years before that, it was a colony of the Dutch. Interesting side note, there's actually an island in Indonesia that I forget the name of because it's not all that important, but the British had control of it, and the Dutch had control of this little island in the New World called New Amsterdam. The English were like, you know, we'll trade you this island over here in Indonesia for that island. The Dutch were like, yeah, okay, sure. Well, that island is now New York that the English got, and no one knows what the Dutch one's called. But at the end of World War II, Japan had taken control of the country, and when they started falling back before the American forces, a lot of the Indonesian leadership there got a little bit worried that the Dutch were going to come back and reclaim them. So they made a few deals, got some help, and when the Dutch came back and said, hey, this is our colony again, they had a little bit of a war of independence before everyone else kind of talked Holland down, like, you know, just let them be. And at that point, Indonesia is composed of about 17 to 18,000 islands, only about a third of which are populated. The boundaries of the country, from the westmost point in Sumatra to the eastmost tip of Papua, is further than the distance from San Francisco to New York City. So it's a vast geographic area. There's about 400 to 500 different languages that are spoken on those islands. So it was really hard for the new leaders of Indonesia to like get everyone united. So what they did is they came up with a lingua franca, a common language called Indonesian. That it's predominantly Malaysian, but they also borrowed vocabulary from Arabic, Dutch, Portuguese, and English, reflecting the different colonial powers that had influence there. Indonesia, like any country, has some more of its grayer history moments. The first president of Indonesia was a man by the name of Soekarno-Hatta, and he is revered as the founding father as much as we revere George Washington, even more in some cases. But he was a good man, and he was the one who was responsible for Indonesia becoming a country. After World War II, Indonesia was in need of reparations, and they went to the United States for asked for help, and the U.S. was very slow in coming to their aid, and so Sukarno started talking. Actually, sorry, his name was Sukarno. His vice president's name was Hatta, but they named the airport Sukarno-Hatta Airport, so I get confused. But he started talking to, I think it was China, about the possibility of them providing aid to Indonesia. And, you know, with this being the Cold War, China being communist, we weren't too happy about that. And there was a coup in which a general named Suharto basically put Sukarno under house arrest, and he became the next president of Indonesia. There are rumors within Indonesian culture that the CIA had something to do with it. I don't know whether or not that's true, but that definitely has played, the events of that coup have definitely played into the culture of Indonesia. Some of the older Indonesians have an inherent mistrust of Americans because of our rumored involvement. With Suharto's push to be anti-communist, make sure the nation stayed anti-communist, there was a lot of discrimination towards people of Chinese descent, to the point that a lot of ethnic Chinese citizens were denied citizenship, passports, public education, unless they changed their traditional Chinese names to be Indonesian names. Even now, government instituted and law discrimination was revoked, but there's still a lot of cultural tension between ethnic Indonesians and ethnic Chinese, to the point where it's very rare for you to see a Chinese person in political office. The opposite of that, though, is that a lot of the higher ups in business and economics within Indonesia are of Chinese descent. So there's a little bit of a politics versus economic power play within the culture. The vast majority of Indonesians are of islander descent, and even that is taking a huge amalgamation and throwing it into a single group. Because there's so many different islands, there's a lot of different ethnicities and cultures within that. In terms of large groups, though, Chinese descent is one of the larger ones, but I mean, I don't know the percentages, but I'd be surprised if it was more than 15 or 20%. One of the big influences there, though, is that Confucianism, is one of, Indonesia accepts 5 religions. There are 5 religions that are officially acknowledged by the government of Indonesia. Islam, Catholicism, Protestantism, which were grouped into Protestantism according to them, Hinduism, and then Confucianism. So there's a lot of influence with, you'll see Confucianist temples every now and then. There's a lot of incense shops. You'll see incense burning on people's windows frequently. And it's also influenced a lot of the cuisine. There's a lot of Chinese restaurants there, a lot of Chinese style food. Duck, especially, is one of the more culinary contributions of the ethnic Chinese. In the US, we often think, when someone hears Islam or Muslim, they often think of the culture of Saudi Arabia, where women aren't allowed to drive, they have to wear the full veils. And interestingly enough, Indonesia's 4th president was a woman. She was the daughter of Sukarno. Her name was Megawati. And it's kind of interesting that this, supposed backwards medieval Islamic country elected a female president long before us progressive Americans did. It was Sukarno, Suharto, Gusdur, Megawati. The man who was president when I was there, he went by SBY. His full name was Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. The vast majority of the Indonesian people are tolerant, they're friendly, they're wonderful, kind people. They're very laid back. That was one of the biggest things for me over there, was just how friendly the culture is. I mean, over here in the US, you hop on a bus, and if you start talking to the person next to you on the bus, people are going to look at you strange like, there's something wrong with you? Why are you talking to me? We very much value our privacy. Over in Indonesia, people have no qualms about just talking to you right on the street. People come up to you and talk to you a lot. You can start conversations, and 99 times out of 100, the people go right along with it. They have no problem with it. They're very friendly, very open, very expressive people. It was wonderful to get to know them. Kesempatan saya untuk hidup dan melayani di Indonesia merupakan salah satu ingatan yang paling penting kepada saya, yang paling dekat kepada hatiku. Saya belajar banyak dari orang-orang di Indonesia, dari bangsa di situ. Dan itu memang merupakan tanah air keduaku. Saya seorang dari Amerika Serikat, dan saya sangat mencintai negaraku. Tetapi negara keduaku ialah Indonesia. Saya bersaksi akan kebenaran Injil yang dipulihkan Yesus Kristus. Saya bersaksi bahwa pendamaian Yesus Kristus adalah benar, bahwa itu memang hal yang paling kuat di dalam dunia ini. Bahwa itu melalui pendamaian Yesus Kristus, di mana kita semua bisa bertobat dari dosa kita. Kita dapat menjadi seorang yang lebih baik daripada kita sekarang. Saya bersaksi akan kasih Allah kepada semua orang. Apapun kepercayaanmu, apapun tindakanmu, Allah mengasihimu. Dia percaya kepadamu. Dan dia ingin supaya kamu bisa menjadi senang dan bisa merasakan sukacita dalam kehidupan ini dan di dalam kehidupan yang akan datang. Dan saya membagikan kesaksian ini dalam nama Yesus Kristus. Amin.
It was wild. I mean, it was just so different. So we first get there and it was so hot. First thing you notice is that all the cars, there's no rules seemingly. I mean, cars are just driving everywhere and there's scooters like cutting everybody off. It's just totally wild. It's so much fun. You'll have the option for sure of eating the weirdest, gnarliest foods you can imagine. I've eaten every single part of a chicken from like the beak down to the feet, literally every single part, and all the guts and stuff, all the insides and intestines. And then same thing with a goat, same thing with a dog. There was a point in time where I was really interested in eating every weird thing that I could possibly get my hands on. So, every time that like cow brain was offered to me or like goat colon or like, dog eyes and just, I eat it all. I don't know. It's a cool thing to do. Dog is a pretty, not normal one. You'll have eyeballs of goats and dogs, and you'd never eat the cats. The cats over there are like really disgustingly gross. So no one touches the cats. Horse torpedo, just horse in general. They make the best drinks. By far. When I came home, that was like my #1 goal, is to learn how to make all these drinks that they made in Indonesia, because they're so tasty and so healthy. It's like going to Jamba Juice every day, They're just fruit all over the place. And so you can get mango smoothies. There's all kinds of fruits there that don't exist here, really. You can get extremely, extremely tasty drinks. It is really, really possible to eat healthy over there. There was a period of time for like 8 months where I wasn't sick. Ever. You can live really, really healthy lifestyle over there. There's like no reason to ever spend more than $5 a day. That's a lot of money. If you have $1, it's similar to having $10. It's like taking whatever fortune you may have and multiplying it by 10, and that's how much you can like buy. First of all, it's packed. Like packed. It's the most densely populated, has the most densely populated islands in the world. Indonesia, there's not space. There's people everywhere. There's buildings and huts, and just like, it is packed full of people. For the Indonesian people, they generally live in really, really small houses. You still don't have toilet paper. For things like shopping, in every city that you go to, you're always going to have a really nice, like Western style grocery store. So that's, food's really easy to pick up on. But the best is food on the street, by far. The food on the street is so ridiculously good, and yet at the same time, when you first get there, it took me probably a month to really start liking the food. It's really different. Really, really, really spicy. The water that they give you, it's boiled to burn off like any impurities or any bacteria or whatever. So you're eating like really spicy food with really hot water, and it's like really hot outside. And so you're just sweating bullets. Always, always, always sweating. Doesn't matter if it's nighttime, you're like constantly sweating. They have these things called Indomarts all over the road, and so like you're constantly buying water bottles and like, getting drinks and stuff and ice cream. You see a lot of manual labor. They're really, really relaxed, for sure. What you see for breakfast, you could very easily have for lunch and very easily have for dinner. There's like, for some reason, here it's like we have certain foods that are breakfast foods and lunch foods and dinner foods. There it's like just food. And my parents got like really worried about this for a long time, and I was like worried at first for sure. It just didn't make sense how they could do it, but they'll leave the food out. They'll make it in the morning. They'll leave the food out under these like glass shelvings, and you can like see and you can like choose what you want. It's like a buffet style almost. But they leave it out all day for like hours and hours and hours and hours. And so the food that you're eating in the morning is legit like later on. You're eating, it was made that morning, like dinner time, you're eating that same food. I don't know how that works sanitary-wise, but it does. A lot of fried foods. I was kind of surprised. Like Indonesia's a lot of islands. I thought there'd be lots of different kinds of fish. You really only eat catfish for some reason. It's good. The catfish is good. Food's really inexpensive. You can find awesome food on the street for practically nothing. There's a city called Solo in central Java. I lived on $1.20 for like 3 days. Not a problem. I was eating maybe not quite as much as I would have normally, but in Solo at least you could get a meal for 25 cents to 20 cents, and it'd totally fill you up, and it's like a totally awesome meal. Really, really good. The modes of transportation over there, they're called angkots. Angkots are basically like minivans that have been gutted. They're like the Mystery Machine in Scooby-Doo, like that kind of size and shape, but just gutted, and there's 2 benches on the inside, and so you're sitting like knee to knee with people on like, someone's sitting right here and I'm sitting right here, and it's just cramped. Like, you are just like huddled up, and it's really hot and it's dirty, really dirty. By that I mean there's just trash everywhere. You're looking out the side of the road, and there's rivers with like huts on stilts, basically made out of kind of bamboo and corrugated metal, and just really, really run down looking places. So you get a sense that it's a really third world country. You can't do a single day like real justice. You can't, as much as I tried to really fully describe what Indonesia was like to my parents, and like I'd write these epic emails. It was really fun, and I'd tell them all the cool experiences of that week. You have to go to really experience it, or to like really understand it. It's night and day from America.
Cobra, horse, giant lizard, dog. Even in some places they eat rat and cat. Fried rice, that was a favorite. They have this thing called satay, which is chicken skewered, covered in peanut sauce. Usually has intestines with it. Intestines, they like those. There's this thing called nasi padang with a meat called rendang. They consider it the most flavorful food in the world. Not the best, but the most flavorful. And I loved it. It's just got a lot of different spices and sauces, and it's so good. And then bubur ayam, I really loved that. The rice porridge with chicken and spices. Everything you do is with your right hand. So even if your right hand is full of groceries and they're giving you your change, you switch it to your left hand and you take it with your right hand. So that was something really interesting. They think the left hand is unclean. And so just getting used to, this is how you do it. Always taking things and giving things with your right hand. You don't ruffle an Indonesian child by the hair. They're very sensitive about the head. I never actually found out why on that one. Probably a lot of other people could tell you, but it's just something you don't do. Another thing in Muslim culture, Islamic culture, you take off your shoes before you enter any home. I had to buy new shoes while I was there that I can get on and off pretty easy, because every time you go into a home, it's very, very impolite to wear shoes. Indonesian holidays, they call them Tanggal Merah, which is red days. And so they mark on the calendar, the date is red. And so they all know that's a holiday. And they usually correspond pretty tightly with Islamic holidays, but they're also Buddhist holidays and Christian holidays that are celebrated. So they really try to promote religious equality. And that's one thing that I really appreciated. One of the ones that I really distinctly remember is they celebrate what's called Kenaikan Isa al-Masih, which means the day that the Prophet Isa rose to heaven. But for Christians, we think of that as the day, 40 days after the resurrection, that Christ ascended to heaven. So they celebrate that as a national holiday, which I thought was really cool. And they celebrate Mother's Day I think it's the day after Christmas. And so they have Christmas and the Mother's Day, one after the other. One of the most interesting Muslim holidays is Ramadan. And so the whole month, they fast from sunup to sundown. And it's really interesting to see, because for the Muslim people, it's their show of their faith, and it's super cool to see, because they have this whole month where they're dedicated and they fast, and then you see at the end of that month they go home, and it's called Lebaran. And Lebaran is this holiday where everyone goes home. So the cities are just empty. They're all out in the villages they're going and visiting their parents, their grandparents, and they're staying with them. So it's just a really unique aspect of family that you really don't see much anywhere else. So Lebaran was a huge holiday. Buddhist holidays, I can't remember much about those. And the other Islamic holidays, they do celebrate various things about different prophets. So the Prophet Muhammad, they celebrate things about him, and they're very mindful of how they celebrate. So I thought that was really interesting. During Ramadan, it's not polite to eat in front of people. Usually we tried our best to be respectful of them during their holidays. We wouldn't eat in front of them. Usually if we got food, we'd take it home and we'd eat it at home, and did our best to help them follow their beliefs, sort of thing. Java, overall it's incredibly safe. I felt really safe the whole time I was there. Of course, there's obviously going to be your rare exceptions, but for the most part, I was very comfortable in day to day. I always kept my wallet in my top pocket because I was afraid of pickpockets, but that's about the extent of it. It's unique culture because there's mostly two different cultures that are there. So you have the Sundanese, who are in the southwest part of Java, and then the Javanese people, who are in the rest of it. And they each have their language, and some of them only know that language. Trying to talk with them, discuss with them. It was so much harder. Yeah, for the most part, they're very humble people, very calm, easygoing. Everyone there loves soccer. They love fried foods. And I guess for the culture, they rice with every meal, always rice. And so even for breakfast, they'll have rice, but usually it's watered down. They call that bubur. In the city, they work in the jobs. There are skyscrapers. It's a very urbanized, densely populated city. And so they'll work in offices and so forth. And a lot of people in the surrounding cities also travel to Jakarta on the trains and buses to get there, to work in these office jobs. But then a lot of other people, they have their own little shops on the side. And so a lot of the women, they run what's called a warung or a warteg. And so wartegs usually sell food. And so they've already got all their home cooked foods that they've made, and then you show up and say, oh, I want this, and they give it to you, always with rice. And the warungs, they have all sorts of things. And so usually like little snack foods, they have cigarettes there, and that's usually what they sell, is cigarettes and snacks. And soaps, hygiene stuff sometimes. Especially outside of Jakarta, they have the people who go around on these, I don't even know what to call them in English, it's the bicycles, where you have something mounted on the bicycle that you sell from, basically, or the carts that they ride around. And so a lot of them make their living by making some sort of food, and they go around the streets selling it all day. Usually they'll have like a jingle, or they'll have something that oh, that guy selling this is out there, let's go get it. A lot of people do work for the cruise industry. So if you meet a chef on the cruise line, or if you talk to someone who's working on the ship, they're probably from Indonesia. I was actually shocked how many people, oh yeah, my brother works on the cruise. Oh, or my son, he's working on the cruise right now. And Java is just such a rich culture. It's got so much. And so some of the places that I enjoyed visiting was a place called Jogja, or Jogjakarta. It's a special province, and the Javanese king is the governor of that province. So it's pretty cool. And it's got so much to do. There's this one street called Malioboro, and it sells anything Javanese that you could ever wish for. And it's incredible. One of my favorites it was one of the cities I served in, Bogor, and they have this thing called Taman Safari. And from what I've heard, that's a common thing, that you go up and you can drive around in front of the animals. And so they have tigers and lions just walking in this caged thing, and you're driving right in between them. So it's way awesome. I just loved it mostly for its culture. There's just so much to learn about these people and why they do the things they do. And so the other island is Sulawesi, and I don't know, I think English it's technically Celebes or something like that, but it's almost directly south of the Philippines. And so I was up there in a city called Manado, and the interesting thing about Manado is it was founded by the Dutch. And so because the Dutch had colonized Indonesia, but Manado especially, because it was a good trading post and a good way station for them. And so what they decided to do is they decided to indoctrinate all the native people of Manado with Christianity. So to this day, it's still a good 80% Christian. So it was a total flip from Java, which is 80 to 90% Muslim. So it was a totally different social atmosphere. The people there are, I wouldn't say worldly, but they try to westernize themselves. Movies, for example, they just absolutely love movies and stuff like that. Fashion tends to leak over into Manado. So whereas in Java you see mostly women wearing the traditional Muslim headgear, the jilbab, Manado is a totally strange foreign thing to me to see women not wearing it. It's got its own foods, totally different than Javanese foods. So Javanese foods, they eat a lot of what's called tempeh, which is a soybean that has been, I think it's fermented, and they put it together in kind of a block, and then they chop it up and they fry it, or they eat a lot of tofu and they fry that tofu. And that's what they usually eat in Java, but in Manado, it's almost all fish. So everything has fish. All of Indonesia has what's called sambal, which is basically crushed peppers, garlic, and onions all mixed together. Whereas Manado has sambal, but it also has this stuff called dabu-dabu, which is kind of like pico de gallo. So I just love the flavor. Grab a spoonful of that and you put it all over your rice, and that's what you eat with the fish. There is a pretty prominent university, Samratulangi, which was named after the first doctor, one of the first doctors of Indonesia. So that was interesting. But Manado is, I think it's 30 kilometers away from the forest that has the smallest monkeys in the world. And so they're the ones that you see holding on to the tree with the really, really big eyes. And so that was interesting. I never got to go because it was a little out of our reach, but we always heard that was a cool thing. They have a bunch of waterfalls, and especially Manado, there's this place off the coast called Bunaken, and they call it the world's aquarium because of its huge diversity of fish and marine life. We would see often a lot of tourists up there in Manado, more so than in the other parts of the island. Manado just always has tourists because they want to see the beach there. They want to see the scuba diving, the snorkeling. Their consonants aren't as hard as English consonants. So if we were to say like, oh, that guy is a crook, you can hear the K really pronounced on the end of crook. But if they were to say, for example, two words, there's one that's batu, which means a rock or a stone, and there's batuk, which there's a soft K on the end, and I'm not super great at making their differentiation, but it's batuk is a cough. And so, oh, I have a stone, and people look at you, that's kind of weird. I'll just say batuk, and they're like, batu, batuk. And it's just a fine distinction that I had an Indonesian companion, he'd say, oh no, you're doing it wrong. You're putting like batuk. And it's like too much. So another difference is rolling the R's. So if you're to say saya dari America, that's a terrible accent, but you would say something like saya dari Amerika. And so it's night and day to them. If you don't say it quite right, they won't understand you. A lot of words are really similar. The difference is in the vowels. And so you have like bijak, which means wise, or you have bajik, which means virtue. So it's really interesting how it's just the A and the I are switched. So if you're to have Indonesian material, it's called batik. But if you're to say Batak, that's a person from northern Sumatra. Within Indonesia, there's a lot of those sub-languages. So there's like Sundanese, there's Javanese, Batak, there's Manadanese. There are hundreds of languages. And so I'd hear people speaking one language and I'd say, oh, hey, do I not know those words yet? And then I'd realize, oh, they're speaking Javanese. Okay. In Manado, the word for I is kita. And so it was super confusing to go up there and they'd say, oh, kita ini, kita. And why are you talking about us when only you are doing it? Okay, oh wait, it's Manadanese. He's using Manadanese. So it's just really interesting to try and grasp the other languages that are there. The word for Thai is dasi, and the word for sin is dosa. And so a lot of greenies really get that confused. They get that mixed up. Oh, I like your dosa. I like your sin. And people look at them funny like, what are you talking about? Kepada teman-teman yang di Indonesia, saya sangat-sangat mengasihi Anda. Saya sangat merindu Indonesia dan orang-orang Indonesia. Saya sangat mau kembali tapi belum bisa. Tapi saya tahu kalian benar-benar hebat. Kalian mengajar saya banyak yang amat penting bagi saya. Yang bisa membantu saya dalam kehidupan sehari-hari. Saya tahu bahwa kalian memang mengajar saya jauh lebih banyak daripada saya mengajar Anda. Dan saya juga tahu bahwa gereja benar, bahwa itu bisa membawa Anda dan membantu Anda dalam kehidupan Anda untuk menjadi lebih dekat kepada Yesus Kristus dan lebih dekat kepada Bapa Surgawi. Saya tahu bahwa Allah hidup, bahwa Dia mengasihi Anda dan Dia mengasihi saya karena Dia biarkan saya ketemu sama Anda. Dan Indonesia itu telah memberkati kehidupan saya. Saya sangat beda daripada sebelum saya datang ke sana. Dan saya sangat mau memberitahu Anda bahwa saya mengasihi Anda. Itu sangat sederhana dan perasaan saya sangat kuat. Dan saya mau bersaksi lagi bahwa Anda bisa kembali kepada Bapa Surgawi melalui Injil Yesus Kristus. Dan itu kesaksian saya. Dalam nama Yesus Kristus, amin.
One thing that everyone has to get used to is you always use your right hand for everything. If you pay, like I mentioned earlier, you hand the on-coat driver the money, you'll want to use your right hand. If you pay him with your left hand, that's offensive. And I've done it before because I forgot, because I was a foreigner, and they're not going to like freak out, but it's just culturally acceptable. When you receive something or give something, you'll use your right hand because you use your left hand in the bathroom. The Indonesian doesn't have, well, they have it, but they don't use toilet paper. So hopefully this is appropriate for the interview, but you will be using your left hand to wipe. It is what it is. It's not a big deal. It really is not. Once you're there, it's just part of life, and it's not a big deal. But that's why you want to use your right hand. You're still clean. It's not like you're dirty or anything, but using your right hand is what's polite and accepted for eating, for giving, for receiving, for shaking hands. But I guess Indonesians don't really shake hands. It's kind of like they just kind of stick their hand out and you shake it and then they pull it back. It's really awkward generally. Nodding was something that was weird for me at first. It's really good to get in the habit of. If you want to contact someone, you'll kind of catch their eye and then you'll kind of nod your head and say, if it's a woman, you say like permisi bu. It's like excuse me ma'am or sir, and that way they'll be engaged and they'll listen to what you're going to say. So nodding. One thing I still haven't gotten out of the habit of is if you walk in between two people that are conversing or a group of people, you always you kind of bow down with your hand to the side so that your body doesn't pass through their level of eye contact. So I was like squatting like way down when I passed by people. But that's kind of like common courtesy, I would think. I still kind of, if I walk in between two people, I get like self-conscious. I'm like, oh, sorry. A lot of times when you go to someone's house, I always took my shoes off. A lot of times they'll be like, oh, you don't need to. But I think that's generally common courtesy, respectful to take your shoes off when you enter someone's home. As long as the floor is not, like if it's a dirt floor, then obviously not. But like cement or tile or whatever, you'll want to take your shoes off. Like I mentioned, they really do love foreigners. They'll probably assume you're Australian or from Europe just because it's kind of more rare for Americans to be there. But once you tell them you're from the United States, and generally they'll be ecstatic. Oh, Obama grew up in Jakarta, supposedly. He went to elementary school there or whatever. And they'll be interested to know what it's like there. They'll assume you're rich. They'll ask for money. There are a lot of beggars in Indonesia, which is sometimes it's very sad. They're missing a limb or they're sick and they're all over the place asking for money. But if you're just friendly to people, smiling is just the biggest thing, I think. But that's something I had to work on as well. But if you just smile at someone, they'll smile back. They're really kind. They'll be interested to talk to you once they know you're approachable. If they think, because they'll assume you're prideful, they'll assume you're minding your own business, you have no interest in them or their life. Once you start to show interest, they'll be pretty excited and they'll open up and ask you all sorts of questions. When you're walking around, everyone's going to be, well, not everyone, a lot of people will just yell at you, not in a mean way. They'll just shout things to you. everyone's gonna be like, hey, mister. They call every white person mister or bule. Bule is like, I guess it means white person or foreigner. Kind of sounds derogatory sometimes, which is annoying. But they'll call you mister or bule and shout something at you in broken English. How are you? Where are you? Things that don't make sense, and you'll just get used to that. But you shout stuff back at them in Indonesian and they'll all laugh and be like astounded. Tips for staying safe. I honestly never felt like I was in very much danger, but you'll always want to be just aware of your surroundings, alert. There are some neighborhoods that you cannot go into because they're kind of more radical. So you'll want to steer clear of those. Going around like on busway, if you have a bag, you'll obviously want to be wearing that on your front. Like if you have a backpack, people wear it on their front. They reverse it so that, if it's just behind you, you don't know who's digging through it. Just be just alert and aware of who's around you, of your belongings. Keep your stuff in areas where you're not going to get swiped or pickpocketed or whatever. But honestly, I never felt like I was in much danger. There is some crime, but it's nothing more than you'd find anywhere else. So it's not a huge issue. The biggest thing is there, as far as sickness goes, it's called dengue fever. And I think it's from mosquitoes. You can wear mosquito repellent. You're going to get mosquito bites regardless. But I don't know if there's anything specific you can do to avoid it. It's kind of rare to get. Just make sure you're just eating a well-balanced diet. You're going to have diarrhea. It's impossible not to, just because it's such a difference in diet and lifestyle. I think I only got sick twice. Once I just had a cold, and then once I got food poisoning. So nothing too serious. Wildlife, the main animals you'll see are cats, which I would avoid. Dogs are rare because Muslims cannot touch a dog. I think if they get like a dog's saliva on them, then they have to do some cleansing ritual. There's cockroaches, rats. One thing that's another interesting cultural thing, most of the apartments don't have like a shower head. It's just you have a faucet coming out of the wall with this big plastic bucket like this big, and then a scooper, like a ladle kind of. And so you fill the bucket up and you just pour the water on yourself, wash, and then you pour the water on yourself to rinse off. And it's actually quite refreshing because it's cold water, just coming out of the spout. I miss the food. I really do. If I could eat what I ate there and just swap the whole diet for what we eat now, I would do it in an instant. It's so good. I think it's healthy. It's probably not as clean as some of the stuff we eat here, but it's very spicy generally. You don't have to eat spicy things all the time. Some Indonesians actually don't like spicy food. Some of my companions that were from Indonesia preferred not to eat spicy food, but I personally loved it. I liked spicy food before. I thought I did. I didn't really know what spicy was in an Indonesian perspective, but I grew to love it once I got there. Pretty much every meal you're going to have rice, white rice with some sort of vegetable, and then some meat. Generally chicken is the most common one. Some fish, beef. Pork's it's very rare because Muslims don't eat pork. It's like a forbidden meat. It's not clean. I know in that area I mentioned Medan, it's a very Christian area. They're famous for their pork because they sell it on the streets because almost everyone's Christian. But in Java, I think I ate pork 2 or 3 times. I ate dog. It was very spicy. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good necessarily. I ate horse, chicken feet, king cobra. These aren't things you have to eat. I was kind of just there. I wanted to try everything. They'll actually give you a shot glass of cobra blood. And on the signs, at least, it says it helps with diabetes, arthritis, boosts your immune system. And I only got sick a couple times. So I actually attribute my health to taking cobra shots twice. I don't know if that's true. I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't do it. But I don't regret it. I'll just say that. But yeah, I love the food. Generally, it's very cheap to eat on the streets. You will want to pick and choose which places you go and don't go to based on whether you believe it's clean or cleaner. Indonesian has amazing fruit. It's stuff I've never even heard of. It's weird. It's stuff you picture coming out of like a Dr. Seuss book. It's got like this weird hair coming off it or spikes and all sorts of colors and shapes, but it's really good. So definitely indulge in the fruit while you're there. Indonesians always eat with their hands, with your right hand, not your left hand. You'll learn like the way you kind of scoop it and then pop it into your mouth. They have it's called sambal. It's kind of like a paste, like a tomato paste consistency, but it's of spices. And they grind it up in what are those things called? It's like the stone bowl with they grind up the chabes or the peppers fresh, probably every day. And it's very good. So as far as food goes, I'm assuming you'll probably love it. Indonesians, they're very friendly. If you're nice to them, they'll be nice to you, especially coming from a different country. They'll really respect that you're making an effort to learn their language, to learn their customs, and just to get to know them as a person. They'll really value someone caring about them, and I think they're very loyal. Once they're your friend, they're going to be your friend, and they'll really care for you. They're generally very hospitable. Once you form a good relationship with them, it's going to last, in my experience. One thing that's kind of confusing and frustrating at times is they're very non-confrontational. They want to be so polite to you. They want to be nice to you, and it's hard for them to openly reject, to openly say, no, I'm not interested. I love Indonesian people, just some of the quirky things that we've mentioned earlier about their culture. You just come to love it. They're very strong on family, which is awesome as well. Islam puts a lot of emphasis on family, just like our religion. So that's one thing that they have in common. When I think of Indonesians, I just kind of think of cheerful and happy and just kind of silly, maybe. It's kind of, I don't want to say immature, but kind of immature in a good way. I don't know, it's weird. It's good though. Indonesian it's the Roman alphabet. There's no symbols nor caricatures like in Chinese or Taiwanese or whatever. So it is quite simple, I believe. I mean, it's hard to learn because it's a foreign language, but I think in comparison, just because of the grammar and the structure, it's a little more simple. But Indonesian is a mixture of several languages, actually. It has Malay. It's actually very similar to Malay, which is spoken in Malaysia. So it has Malay, it has Arabic, Dutch, some Portuguese. They kind of adopt some English words and throw an Indonesian twist on it for certain things, which is funny once you hear them. It's pretty simple, the grammar. It's kind of hard to understand at first, but once you get it, it's really quite simple. There's actually no past and present tense conjugations for verbs. I know I took Spanish a little bit in high school, and there was all that conjugation, and I don't even remember it. But in Indonesian, there's no conjugation for the verbs. You just specify by the words you use. So you say, oh, yesterday this happened. You don't have to conjugate it. I don't know. It's simple. It's really cool. Just a common phrase would be apa kabar. Literally translated, that is what news. It just means how's it going, what's up. It's kind of informal. I remember when I arrived there, we rode this bus to the mall to buy some bags. So we hop on this old rickety bus, and it's crammed full of people, and they're all like shocked that these white kids with ties just hopped on the bus. We all just start saying apa kabar, and we don't know what they say back to us, but they were all laughing because that's such a, like, they could tell we were foreign, because you don't just say apa kabar to someone you just met on the streets. There's more formal ways of introducing yourself and things like that. But it's a fun language to learn, in my opinion.
I joke around with people I talk to on the street. I tell them there's only 2 seasons in Indonesia, wet season and dry season, or it'd be hot season and really hot season. During the rain season, it'd come and the rain would pour, anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day. Usually 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. So we'd still work even though it was pouring. And I have one experience where we were on our way to go visit with someone. We had already made an appointment with him, or as they say in Indonesia, a promise. We already had a promise with him. And so we knew, even though it was raining, we had to show up. His house was about 30 minutes away by bike. The rain just got progressively worse and worse, and the streets got more and more flooded. As I pedaled, I'd always step through it, step in and out of the water. And so it came up to about my knee when I stuck my foot in, and then I pulled it out. It was raining really hard, and I thought it was so amazing. It was like my first time I'd ever seen places flood. I felt like I was hydroplaning on a bike. And I pulled out my dinky little camera and I started recording and I showed it around.
Yo, here we are in Indonesia. The whole streets are just flooded.
And then to show how deep the water was, I stepped into their street.
And it's flooded. Check this out.
But instead of stepping into the street, I accidentally stepped into the sewer and I fell in.
Watch me put on my foot.
And as I fell in, I caught myself on a pole, so I didn't fall all the way in. But I got the whole thing on video. It's an experience that sticks with me even today, and I have proof of it. When we were biking, sometimes we got really tired, so we'd grab onto the side of trucks as they were going by, and they loved it because they're like, "What's this white guy grabbing our truck?" And so we'd grab on, and they'd cheer and they'd honk and they'd drive us all the way to where we needed to go. There was a party. It was put on by our religious group, and they told us we could come if we took bikes. It was at the top of a hill. We just hitched a ride on the back of trucks. We grabbed onto the back and we held on with one hand to our handlebars, and they drove us right all the way up to the party. And everyone, when we got there, was so amazed. They're like, "How did you guys get here? What? And you guys don't even look tired." That was a good time. Some of my favorite foods from Indonesia include, well, they've got a lot of really good food. That's the truth. But I think some of my favorite weird foods that you've never heard of and never tried. I really enjoyed eating dog, which might come as a surprise to some people, as well as some of their different fruits that they have. They have a lot of fruit like jackfruit, snake fruit, and durian, which are all actually pretty good. Durian is known throughout Asia as the king of fruits. It's this spiky fruit that when you crack it open, it smells like rotten eggs and stinky feet. It's like a mix of those two. And the taste is pretty similar to rotten eggs and stinky feet, but it's kind of creamy as well. A lot of people like to eat it by itself, but as well as in like ice cream or in like candy. There's like durian candy and things like that. It's actually really popular all throughout Asia, through India, through China, through I think Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia area. I think some really good foods, of course, is like satay, which is peanut sauce coated chicken, and it's grilled. They put it out on a little grill with coals underneath, and they fan it all day. All like the smoke and the smell that comes from it just gets blown into the streets. When you're out biking on the streets, you catch those fumes as they come by, and you're like, wow, I need to eat that right now. So we'd often pull over and eat food just from smelling it on the street. I think I was impressed at how much of animals that they ate. And what I mean by that is like when you get a chicken, you get everything, and you eat everything. They tear those pieces of chicken apart, and I got really good at it when I was serving in Indonesia. Get like a chicken breast and you'd eat the liver, you'd eat the gizzard, you'd eat every part of it, even like down to the tendons. I'd be eating with other Indonesians and they'd eat all the tendons. And the only thing left was a pile of bones. And sometimes they'd start eating that if they were still hungry. I think that was pretty impressive, and they'd do that with every animal that they ate. They were very conservative in the food they ate and how they ate as well. I didn't see a lot of wastefulness. All the chicken organs they had, they usually fry them and then put them on the side of the road just for you to come by and pick up, buy, and eat. And they do that with, I think the most popular one was like chicken intestine, which was actually pretty good. Not gonna lie. And they also have something called tempeh. It's like an alternate for tofu. It's made from the same stuff. It's made from soybeans, but instead it's like lumped together, allowed to ferment, and they cut it up and deep fry it. And so it kind of sounds not very good because it's like fermented soybeans, but it's actually really good. And that's one thing that I really miss. I wish we had here. Not because it's so good, but just because like it was just such a regular part of an everyday meal. I just want that as part of my meals. Something that I love about Indonesians and their culture. And I'll have to tell you, my view is of the island of Java. Every island in Indonesia has different culture, and the people are different, and they respond different, and they have different jokes, they have different backgrounds, they have different languages. So everyone is so different, but my experience with the people I met on Java was overall amazing. All the way from Surabaya, which is the far east end, to Jakarta, which is in the western end. And I found people that were kind and welcoming. They were so willing to give when they had so little. They're very social people. Indonesians are so social. They care so much about the relationships that they build. And so when you build a strong relationship with an Indonesian, you can count on him for, I would almost say, the rest of your life. Like, he'll be there. When you have a strong connection with an Indonesian, they really hold through on those relationships. And so it taught me a lot about how I should be valuing relationships, about how I should view others and really treat them as equals and really strive to be kind to anyone, because you don't really know where you're going to end up. The vast diversity that exists within Indonesia. Every place I went, I met people of very different backgrounds, but they all come together very quickly. When you find a good cause, they're willing to rally around and join quickly. Just super awesome. Differences between living in Indonesia. Socially, it's very different. In Indonesia, they have a term for white people, or people with white skin, or Caucasians, and they call them bule. And so bule used to mean something very vulgar, but because of how popular Western culture is nowadays among all countries of the world, bule, or white people, are often seen as like celebrities. So oftentimes when I went around the cities, random people would ask to take pictures of us. Honestly, I thought it was so funny. And there's good and bad to it. There comes, with prejudice and all that. When I go buy something, people raise the price, but that's pretty normal. But it was very different. I looked like an outsider, and everyone knew I was an outsider. We had pictures taken of us randomly all the time. I'd find people on the train, and they'd pull out their phone and they'd take a picture, and I'd just wave at their little camera. They'd be so surprised that I saw that. But socially, it was very different for me. Coming from a place like Utah, where you can just kind of, sit back in the bus and nobody bats an eye, but I step onto a bus in Indonesia and I've got all eyes on me. Not only that, but I tower over them. The average Indonesian is definitely less than 6 feet, and I don't think I ever met an Indonesian who was taller than me. But physically, it's very different as well. Because of the climate, Indonesia is built very different. They can't really have houses of wood because they just corrode so quickly with so much rainfall, that everything's built out of cement. So all my houses, all the walls, all the floors, cement. The living conditions weren't great, but they're definitely not as bad as people think. I did live in most of the cities, but everywhere had electricity, everywhere had running water, though you couldn't drink it. And overall, it was pretty good. A lot of Indonesians have decent living conditions. There are some areas that are really poor, especially among the elderly people, which is really sad to see. But yeah, living in a hot, humid country was still very enjoyable. Biggest culture shock that happened to me was all the attention that I got. I definitely was not, the most popular kid in high school, or someone who hung out around a lot of people at all times. And so to have so many eyes on me all the time, watching every move that I did, was a little shocking. Another big culture shock was one of the people I lived with, who was native Indonesian, was a little bit, I would almost say, jealous of the attention, though it was unwanted attention, and that kind of created some tension that I was not expecting. That tension of culture came as a surprise. So that's maybe the biggest culture shock I had. Everyone asks, what is Indonesian like? And they always ask, how hard is it to learn? And I'll be honest, from my experience, Indonesian is not the hardest language. And that's actually a really enjoyable and straightforward language. One of the most structurally sound languages I think that there is. Their grammar is strict, and you don't really do anything different other than the grammar. Like whereas in English, some things that look the same sound different, some things that sound the same look different on paper, but in Indonesian it's always the same. You read things how they're spelled, grammar is only yes and no, and they do a pretty good job of keeping a tight lid on that. So it's actually a pretty enjoyable language to learn, and to anyone who's trying to learn it, good luck. You got a lot of vocabulary to go. I love their Independence Day celebrations. It's so much fun. Indonesians have the best Independence Day celebrations. Like here in America, we just watch money explode and maybe have a barbecue. But there they have games and prizes, and it's every neighborhood block is doing something. So you step outside and your whole street is like a party, and then you go over to your local community church and they're having a party, and everyone's just loving each other, which was a lot of fun. Nothing physically I think they have I want to really bring back, but if I could bring back all my friends and the loving culture that they have, I'd definitely bring that. To every English speaker that's watching this, and maybe Indonesians who are English speakers, there are a few of you. I really love Indonesia. I was very, very blessed to be able to spend time there and to get to know them. They're a very unique people. Their ability to come together and to ignore differences, and as well as to work together, was very impressive. And I think it helped me to grow a lot. I think I'll be forever changed by the experiences that I had in Indonesia. Dan kepada semua orang Indonesia yang belum bisa berbahasa Inggris, saya ingin kasih tahu Anda bahwa negara Anda salah satu negara terbaik di dunia. Dan menurut saya mungkin satu-satunya yang terbaik di dunia. Dan saya sangat ingin kembali ke Indonesia. Dan bahkan saat saya tinggal di sana, saya pengen tinggal di sana untuk selamanya, untuk sampai saya mati gitu. tapi tidak bisa. Ada keluarga di sini, ada kebutuhan lain di sini. Tetapi negara Anda sangat luar biasa dan saya akan selamanya, maksud saya kehidupan saya terubah selamanya oleh karena banyak teman yang saya dapat di Indonesia dan pengalaman yang saya dapatkan dari orang Indonesia. Yeah, thank you.
Stuff I really admire about Indonesians, they're really friendly. Even when I was brand new, I couldn't speak Indonesian. I was a total I felt like a tourist. I had no idea what was going on. But even then, the Indonesians they were so friendly and so welcoming to me, and they always made me feel like I was welcome there. They didn't make fun of me for not being able to speak Indonesian very well. They would correct me if I said something wrong, but if I said something they didn't understand, they would just ask me, "Oh, what?" But in a really nice way. And they were just so nice and so friendly. And every person I would meet in the street, I'd say, "Oh, hi, good morning, how are you doing?" And they'd say, "Oh, I'm doing well, how are you?" And people would be happy to talk with me. Whereas here in America, a lot of times you walk by somebody on the street and you say, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" They say, "Yeah, I'm good, whatever," and they walk away. In Indonesia, they're so open and so warm and friendly. Differences between living in Indonesia and living in the US. One of the big ones is showering. Here we have running water and showers. A lot of times in Indonesia we'd use a bak mandi. So you just take like a bucket and just dump cold water on yourself to bathe. Which sounds awful, but it was really nice when I was living in Semarang and it was like 40 degrees Celsius every day. And we'd get home after biking around and just be super sweaty and super hot. You get that nice cold water over yourself, feels really good. See other stuff, things are really expensive here. Indonesia's much cheaper, which is nice. I can buy food there for like 14,000 rupiah. It's like fairly expensive, and that's about $1 here, whereas lunch here is $5 is cheap. So it's a lot cheaper in Indonesia. It's a lot hotter there and humid most of the time, which I like. It's too cold here and too dry. I think public transportation is better in Indonesia. Well, public transportation is further reaching. You can take an angkot wherever you want. Angkots are super gross and small and just awful, but you can get anywhere you want with them. So an angkot, it's a van that's smaller than a van in the US or bigger. It's like slightly larger than a minivan. And it's got a door on one side, and then the inside is gutted. And it has benches along the sides, and they will just stuff people in there, and then you pay maybe 2,000 or 3,000 depending on how far you're going, which is like 15-20 cents US, and they will fit 15, 16 people into this thing. Some of them, they'll have music pumping, and angkot drivers are the craziest drivers you will ever meet anywhere in the world. They're weaving through traffic like they're on a scooter, but they're in a big van. Sometimes you fear for your life, but you will get where you're going faster than you will with just about anything else. For big culture shocks for me, I think obviously people in Indonesia, not a whole lot of them speak English, so that was hard for me when I first got there, but I really love Indonesian. It's a great language. People there are really open about their religion, which I think is very different from the US, where we don't talk about it a lot. Over there, it's on your official government-issued identification, and everybody will talk about it. Of course, most people there are Muslim, which is awesome. I love Muslims. I've become really good friends with so many of them, and they're just really great people, and I always felt like I could talk to them and we could have really interesting discussions, but that was obviously very different from the US. It took a while for me to understand how to use the money, because it's a very cash-driven society, and their money is completely different from ours. It's all in thousands, so the smallest bill is 1,000, the largest is 100,000. In the last city I lived in Bogor, and there's this big zoo called Taman Safari, and so we went there a little while before I went home to go and just hang out, me and my friends. And at one point there was an opportunity where you could take a picture with an orangutan, and I thought that was cool because orangutan are originally from Indonesia. They're only native to Indonesia, so I thought, oh, I've got to get a picture with one of these. So I pay the money to get a ticket to go and take a picture with this baby orangutan, and I step in and I stand next to him, and he just grabs onto my shirt and starts pulling me all over, and he grabs my glasses and pulls them off my face and is throwing them all over the place and like attacking me. So I have some really funny pictures of me being mauled by this baby orangutan who was hanging onto my side, and it was awesome and I loved it. Right after I got to Indonesia, it was my third day And me and some of my friends decided to go to a waterfall up in the mountains near the city where we were living. And I was brand new. I barely spoke any Indonesian. I didn't really know what was going on. And we go, and my friends tell me we're going to get on this bus, and we're going to ride it up into the mountains, and then we're going to take this other thing called an angkot. We're going to take that up to this waterfall. So I get on this bus, and I'm pretty tall. I'm almost 2 meters tall. And this bus was not designed for people that tall, so my knees were pushed up against my chest like that. And we sat there for 45 minutes, up into the mountains, get out, and I step out, and I look, and there are monkeys just everywhere, because we're up in the mountains next to this waterfall, and there are these monkeys all over, and my friends are telling me, don't go near the monkeys because they will steal your stuff. And then we had to hike down into a waterfall, and it was one of the most beautiful places I'd ever seen. It was a waterfall in this valley up in the mountains in central Java, and it was so hot and so high up that I almost died. But it was so pretty and just an amazing experience. Some of my favorite foods from Indonesia, I mean, obviously you have to say rendang, because that's one of the best foods in the entire world. I love nasi goreng, I love mie goreng. I used to eat a lot of warteg. There was a place in Jakarta where I would eat a lot of tempe orek. That was so good. Well, so rendang it's like beef that's cooked in coconut milk and spices, which is really good. Nasi goreng is fried rice, but it has certain kinds of spices, and it's got this sweet soy sauce over it. Mie goreng is the same thing but noodles. And then warteg, it's a restaurant where you can get rice and then a bunch of like vegetables or other stuff. So tempeh, it's a kind of soybean product, I guess. So sort of like tofu, but processed differently. And then it's cooked in a bunch of spices and it's got the sauce over it, and it's one of my favorite foods. Some crazy foods that I ate in Indonesia. I mean, you eat chicken head and chicken feet pretty often. Those are all right. I'm not a huge fan, but they're okay. You eat goat head sometimes. In one of the cities I served in, one of their specialties is a roasted goat head. Also a chicken head. It's like you got like the head, and then it's like the same way you would eat a chicken leg, where you just eat the meat off of the bones. Same like the feet. The goat head I never actually had. I was going to, but then we ended up being busy that day, and then I moved, so I didn't get the chance. I really liked es degan, or es kelapa muda. It's like coconut juice. That was really good. I used to get that a lot. The fresh fruit juice is super good, basically anywhere. It's really cheap. And there's this soda called Badak up in Medan, and that's really good. It's like sort of like root beer, but a little bit fruitier, and it's probably my favorite soda. You can only find it in that one city. One time, me and my friend, we were biking we were in the city of Jogja, and we had to bike about 7 miles, and we had to bike all the way across the city to get to meet with one of our friends. And we started biking, and it was nice and sunny out, but it was the rainy season, and so we were a little bit worried. And about 10 minutes into the bike ride, it started raining. And then it kept raining, and it kept raining, and it kept raining, and it was just pouring. We finally got to our friend's house, and we were over there for a while, and then when we left, it was still raining, and all of the streets were flooded about 2 feet high, and we were riding bikes. So when we would pedal, our feet would go down underneath the water every time we'd go down, and then come back up out of the water as we would keep biking. And it was all the way like that for the however many kilometers we had to bike back home. That was crazy. The bike would stay on the ground because it was heavy enough, but it was just your feet would be going completely underwater, so you'd be biking way slower because it's way hard to pedal when your feet are going in and out of water. In my last city, I became friends with this guy. He was from Manado, but he lived in Bogor and had been there for a while, and his wife was Javanese, from Jogja, I think. And we became friends with them when we'd go over pretty often. And one day we would usually meet with them around 3 in the afternoon because his daughter was a badminton player. She had practice, so we had to work around her schedule. But one day we called him and said, hey, can we come over today? And he said, yeah, but come over at like 10 instead of at 3 like usual. We said, okay, that's fine. So we go over at 10 and we hang out with him for a while, and he says, okay, elders, I have a surprise for you. I've cooked you lunch because you're here for lunchtime, and I don't want you to have to go and buy lunch somewhere, find lunch. So I've cooked you traditional Manadanis food. And I'd never eaten Manadanis food because that's on one of the islands off to the east and I'd never been there. And he brings out like 6 plates of food. And it was some of the most delicious food ever. And we just had the best time of just chatting with this family who we loved them and they loved us. And we had just delicious food and great conversation. And it perfectly summed up my experience in Indonesia of just feeling so welcome and so loved by the people. And by the time I had to go home, I didn't want to leave. I love Indonesia and I'm hoping to get back as soon as I can. I guess one thing that I just want to talk about real quick is just the culture of Indonesia, I guess, the like traditional culture. I'm a huge fan of that kind of stuff, and Indonesia has such a rich cultural heritage, much more so I think than the United States does, where when I lived in Solo, I had a chance to go and see wayang, which is traditional shadow puppets done, and there was a live gamelan, which is like this percussion orchestra, and I got to see that live, and that was just really cool. There are just so many interesting things about the culture of Indonesia. There's such a campuran. There's such like a mix of so many different cultures there. Cultures from India and China and the Middle East. It's a really fascinating place, and I love it. Yeah, so learning Indonesian was not super hard. It's a fairly easy language to learn, I think. It's an easy language to get decent at. It's a really hard language to master or speak like a native speaker, to speak really fluently. Mostly because there's a really sharp divide between Indonesian that's baku, or like formal, and Indonesian that's informal, like bahasa gaul. And that was one of the hardest hurdles for me, was trying to learn how to talk to people my age on the street. Because if I came up to them and started talking like I'd learned here in America, they would laugh at me because what are you talking about? It's like if I was speaking like I was reading Shakespeare to an American. It's like that's not how people talk. They talk completely differently. That's definitely the hardest part about learning Indonesian. But it's a really cool language. It sounds different from almost any other language that I've ever heard. It's just totally unique. If I could say anything to the people of Indonesia right now, I guess it would be that you all are amazing, and I'm so thankful for all of the opportunities that I had to interact with so many of you. And obviously there's a lot of you I haven't met, but I know that you all are great people, and I love all of you, and I always felt so welcome there, and hopefully I can come back soon.
When I went to Indonesia, it almost felt like I was a celebrity just because I'm tall, I'm fat by their standards, and I am white. I went to Indonesia and instantly people wanted to talk to me and wanted to learn more about me, and I'm not used to that. I fit in here and we all kind of mind our own business, but in Indonesia it was just such a culture shock to see how much different it was. I was in Bekasi and I was riding an angkot, that's the public transportation there. And I'm a big dude for Indonesians. I'm almost 2 meters tall. I'm about 110 kilograms. So I get into this angkot and it's packed. There is no breathing room for almost anyone. We have probably 12 people in the angkot. And then this one lady looks at me and then she's like, hey, we should count how many people are in the angkot. And she counts everyone, 1, 2, 3, and then she points at me, 4, 5, 6, and then starts counting off everyone else. I've been in places in Indonesia where they hardly see white people and they were just shocked to see me. They saw me and they yelled out bule bule, which is basically like white person, and they just immediately wanted to be my friend. And it was definitely fun to meet new friends that way. With the people first, with the Indonesians, I just love how kind you guys are. I remember there was one time, it was a hot day and I was walking with one of my friends. Someone saw us and she could tell that we were tired and she could tell that we were probably hungry too. And she just offered to give us some snacks and some water and help us go on our way. And it was just the kindest thing. The culture in Indonesia is almost a brotherhood. Everyone is family, and it doesn't matter what race you are, it doesn't matter what religion you are. We're all there to be nice to each other and to help each other out, and I really appreciated that. I knew that even when I met someone who wasn't of the same faith as me, that they were going to love me and respect me for who I am, and I could love and respect them. There are a lot of differences between living in Indonesia and living here in the United States. One time I was fed cobra and python, so I ate some snake. It actually tasted pretty good though. I really liked it. In Indonesia, you can't have a meal without eating rice. One of my favorite foods is probably ayam geprek, which is basically chicken with some sambal, which is kind of like salsa here. Super spicy, but I really like it. It's super good. I also really like to eat rendang. Almost anything I've ever tried. I really like dabu dabu. It's a super spicy sambal. And in Indonesia, a lot of houses often have leaks in them when it rains, but pretty rare for that to happen here, and if it does, it gets fixed quickly. There were some places where we tried to fix it and it would just keep leaking over and over again in different places throughout the house. Here in the United States, we would never shower with a bucket. We usually always have hot water. It was something that I really had to get used to when I was in Indonesia. Here we have clean running water, and there's aqua gallons, but that's not running water by any means. When I lived in Indonesia, I really learned to appreciate what I have. The weather in Indonesia is consistently pretty hot and humid. There are some cities and some times when it rains, there's like a rainy season. Really, it still doesn't get all that cold in my opinion. It stays pretty hot, and it's like that all year round. I don't think I ever really needed a jacket in Indonesia. It was never too cold for me. It also wasn't too hot for me either, because I'm from Arizona and it's a desert and it's super hot there too. If I could say anything to the people of Indonesia, I'd probably just tell them I love them and I'm grateful for your guys' example to me. I'm grateful for your example of love and for all of the care and service that you guys give to others. And I really am grateful for the time I had to spend in Indonesia with you guys. It was one of my favorite moments of my life for sure. Dan saya sangat mengasihi Anda semua. Saya berharap Anda semua di sana sehat-sehat dan bisa semangat terus, selalu merasakan kasih dari orang lain dan selalu bisa melayani orang lain. Saya sangat bersyukur bagi teladan Anda dan saya sangat mengasihi Anda.
It was really late at night, and so I grabbed a telephone pole, but it ended up being a electricity pole, and I electrocuted myself all the way up my arm in the pouring rain, and I was a little shocked by that, and I couldn't like feel my hands for a couple days, but then it got better and we moved on. I was very shocked by that. Did I ever ride an elephant? No, I didn't. I really wanted to, but I did ride a camel one time at the zoo in Jogja, and they have elephants you can ride too, but that day when we went, it was closed for some reason, and so we rode a camel instead, which was just as fun though. It was very exciting. When I first moved to Indonesia, one thing that really kind of shocked me was the traffic and how you drive on the opposite side of the road than we do here in America, and just really fast, and there's a lot of motors and mobiles, and you just kind of go in and out everywhere. And there was a few times where I got hit by a motorcycle or a car or a becek. I was walking down the side of the road with one of my friends, and a car came and hit me on the side of my shoulder, and I fell into the wall, and I said, oh my gosh, this place is crazy. But then, I just learned how to live with the traffic, and it was great. So something that I absolutely love and admire about the people of Indonesia is how just loving and respectful they are. From the moment that I got there, they were so nice to me, and I didn't know the language, and so I was always confused and had no idea what they were trying to say to me or where I was trying to go, but they always were making sure that I was where I needed to be, and they're just so respectful. I would notice as I lived there longer and was able to become more part of their culture, I could see just how loving and caring they are to their families, especially to their grandparents and their parents, and just how respectful they are to everybody. And I really admire their different customs that they have of just being kind to everyone and just making sure that people feel welcome. One crazy experience that I had with food was I was eating with a group of people at a restaurant, and they brought out the head of a chicken, and I had never had that before, since here in America we don't really eat all of the parts of the chicken, and so they're like, oh, you need to eat this chicken head, and I said, are you sure? And so I just put the whole thing in my mouth and tried to eat the tongue and the neck and stuff, and it was really interesting. It actually wasn't that bad though. I kind of ended up liking it, but just the idea at first of a chicken head was kind of alarming to me. When I had first arrived, I'd been in the country for maybe 2 weeks, and I was still really jet lagged because we were about a 13 or 14 hour time difference, and I'd never left America before, so I was really tired. And me and my friend, we were working all day. It was really hot, it was hard, and this one night I got up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, and as I was coming back out of the bathroom to go back into the bedroom, I just like passed out from exhaustion, and I hit my head smack on the tile floor in the kitchen, which was really hard, and I hit my arm on the fridge, and I knocked myself out in the kitchen. Oh, I'm sorry. Knocked myself out in the kitchen, and then I woke up a couple minutes later, and I didn't even remember that I was in Indonesia. And so a few days later, I was still not feeling very good and ultimately started to throw up blood, so my friend took me to the hospital, which was very scary for me because I still did not know the language, and so these doctors are asking me all these questions and I am not understanding anything. I said, I don't know. I'm sorry. It turns out I had just concussed myself, gave myself a concussion, but for a couple days I was really scared because I had no idea what had happened and I couldn't understand the doctor, so it was kind of scary. It was really terrifying. I was like, I'm gonna die. There was this one time while I was still living in Yogyakarta with one of my friends. We were trying to leave our neighborhood, or the kampung, and to get out to go ride our bikes to lunch or something, and our neighbors had decided to cut down all of their trees, and so we couldn't get out of our gate because there was just like tree branches everywhere. And so we thought we were clever and said, well, we'll just jump over all of these trees so that we can get to where our bikes are. But there ended up being tons of like little red biting ants all over the trees, and they didn't tell us, and so we started to jump over all of these tree branches, and we got all of these ants like running up our legs and our arms and just like biting us everywhere and stuck in our hair. And so for the rest of the day we kept just being like, ow, and just like getting bitten by all of these little ants, just like little pinches everywhere. It's like, ah! And they just sat on the side of the street and just laughed at us. Sweet. One thing that I'm so sad that America does not have that Indonesia has is martabak, which is like a dessert in Indonesia. It's kind of like a thick pancake, and then they put like condensed milk and chocolate or peanuts or anything in it, and then they fold it up and cut it, and it's like a little, like a grilled cheese but with chocolate pretty much. And those are my favorite things to eat when I would come home in the nighttime. They're just on the side of the street and you can go and people will make it for you, and I really do miss that. Another thing that I really miss about Indonesia is the Indomarets, which are just like little corner stores kind of, and they're everywhere. You can go and buy water bottles or snacks, little ice creams, and me and my friend would always go all the time because it's very hot in Indonesia, and we rode our bikes everywhere. We didn't have a car, and so we'd be riding our bikes up all these big hills and just be sweating to death, and then we would see an Indomaret and we would say, oh, we have to stop there, and so we would stop and get an ice cream for like 5 rupiah, which is just a couple of cents here in America, and then or get water or whatever, and just be fun, and you can talk to people and they're so kind, and then you get back on your bike and you keep going doing what you're doing, and it just, I don't know, it always made my day. You can get a whole meal for like $1. It's awesome. Yeah. One thing too about the culture that I really like in Indonesia is just how everybody is always outside and they're with people, and they have their little carts and of food and things. I think a lot of people's jobs there, you know, are outside and they're walking around, and it's always really hot in Indonesia, so maybe that's part of it too. But I feel like in America a lot of people work in offices, or we do more things indoors, I mean, and outdoors too, of course, but I really liked in Indonesia how everything was always outside and active and kind of just always moving around. I liked the busyness that they have there. Some cultural differences, I think, from Indonesia and America. Indonesia, especially Jogja, I lived there the longest. They have a lot of traditions, I think, that go back a super long time. They have a certain kind of dress wear and hats and a different kind of style, where in America, I don't really see that a whole lot of traditions that go back so far, maybe because, you know, we were founded way after Indonesia, but I think that's one thing that you can just see their roots go down so deep, and they have all these traditions and things that they do always that, you know, they never miss. As in America, I feel like we don't always, you know, like we make our own traditions with our families, as in like the country has grounded traditions that they use. One thing that I think is really interesting about Indonesia, I lived in Yogyakarta for about 6 months or so, and we went to visit the Borobudur temples, and there's a lot of school children and different people there, and me being kind of standing out, not from Indonesia, they wanted to take a lot of pictures with me and some of my friends. And so instead of looking around at the different buildings and architecture, I feel like more people were excited to see us, and so we had a line of people standing that we would just go and they would come and take pictures with us, and so I kind of felt like a celebrity for the day because they were very excited to see us. I guess one of the hardest things for me was that we don't use our left hand. You know, when you give money or anything, using your left hand is offensive, right? Because this is kind of like your dirty hand, and so it's always more proper and more respectful to use your right hand. And for me, I had never really thought of that before, since in America that isn't really quite a big of a deal. And so I really struggled sometimes. I would give money with my left hand and then be like, oh no, I'm so sorry, and then I had to switch it to my right hand. And they were always really nice about it because they knew that I was just learning, but I think that definitely took me a long time to get that into my head that I shouldn't use my left hand. Some of the biggest differences that I saw from living in Indonesia and living in America would probably, number one, probably the housing. In Indonesia, it's just more of like a smaller kind of room, not a lot of chairs or tables. They like to really sit on the floor, which I love now, to sit just on the floor and eat. I think it's so fun. But opposed to America, I feel like a lot of people have like couches and really big tables and things that they like to sit on to relax, whereas in Indonesia it's kind of like you just sit on the ground. And also the shower situation is a little bit different. In Indonesia, you know, it's a lot of bucket showers. Yeah, just you kind of just stand there and just get yourself wet. As in America, we have like hot water and like a shower head, which I thought was kind of interesting. Both good, you know, in their own ways. So probably just like the living situation for sure is a little bit different. The routine of the countries are very different too. Kind of how I said before, how Indonesians, you know, they're always outside, they're working, there's lots of rice fields, or they're selling things in their like little carts that they walk around in. As in America, you know, it's more of like organizations, I feel like, with buildings and different businesses, which kind of gives you like a different feel of that. But the difference in transportation that I saw, I feel like in America, a lot of people just drive cars. Like they have their own car. They have bus systems here too, but I don't feel like they're used as much as in Indonesia, because in Indonesia they have the busway, which especially in Jakarta, when it links kind of everything together, and a lot of people just ride the bus because they don't have as much like parking spaces, I feel like, as in America. And a lot of people have motorcycles to help you zip through traffic more, which I saw. And people have cars too, but I feel like they favor either the motorcycles or the busway more, as in America we just take cars. For me, learning the language, learning Indonesian, it was kind of hard. Obviously, a lot of people are always say, oh, it's easy, don't worry, like you'll get it. And I ultimately did, but at the beginning it was really hard. I lived just with one other girl, and she was from Timor-Leste, so she only spoke Indonesian and she didn't know any English, and I didn't know any Indonesian. And so for about 3 months it was just us together, and we would take out our phones and put on Google Translate, and we would just type to each other, because I said I have no idea what anybody is saying, and she didn't know what I was saying. So we both, you know, we tried to communicate the best that we could. And so it took a little while for me to try to understand it, and I had before previously learned the language for about a month and a half, or tried to, but when I got there, everybody's accents and the way that they strung their words together, I don't know why, it was so hard for me to understand. And so people would try to talk to me and I'd be like, what? I don't know. But I just tried to read books that were in Indonesian, and just by talking to my friend that I lived with, I was able to better learn the language, and now I know it fairly well, I guess, but it did take a little while and a lot of funny situations where people said something to me and I had absolutely no idea what they said to me at all, and I just stood there like, I have no idea what you're saying, and they probably thought I was the biggest idiot, but that's okay because I did finally learn the language. My favorite meal is probably, it's called nasi goreng, or in English fried rice. Everywhere in all the cities I served in, you could get it off the side of the street, and it's so good, and just the people there just make it. And you know, they always have like kind of like spin on it with their spices and different things they throw in there, but I think it's definitely one of my favorites. A lot of food in Indonesia is really spicy. For me, I'm not that strong, but I did like trying all the different spices and the different kind of combinations of foods. I really liked ayam geprek also, which is like spicy chicken, when I was strong enough to stomach it. One food that I thought was kind of different that I had just never experienced before is called bakso, which is just, you know, the meatballs that they sell on the side of the street. They weren't bad, I just had never tried them before, but they're just like a different kind of meats and stuff, and just all kind of crushed up, and then they put like the peanut sauce over it and you can eat it, which was kind of interesting for me. I'd never really experienced like crushed up like cartilage and stuff before. If I could go back to Indonesia for one day, I would definitely go back to Jogja, where I lived for such a long time. I loved that city with my whole heart. And I would go to Jalan Malioboro and shop along the sides and eat all the really good food, probably soto ayam Betawi, which is like a really good soup they have on the side of the street. And then I would go to either Prambanan or Borobudur temples again and look at all of the really cool buildings and just enjoy being in my favorite city in the whole world. I think my message to the people of Indonesia is just to say thank you, I think, for welcoming not only just me to my country, but everybody who comes. You were always so respectful and so kind. I love that you're so willing to share your culture with anybody that comes, and you're excited. And I just love to see the light that the people, that all of you guys have to share and to offer. And I think that there are so many lessons that everyone could learn from going to Indonesia and seeing just the way that your society and your culture works.
So things that I admire about Indonesians, there are a lot. Their culture is like much more laid back and friendly and like family oriented. And so I like that. I like that walking down the street, you know, a dozen people are gonna like greet you and say good morning. Like that was just great. Every day you just felt like very cared for by the community. And then families as well. Like it's not uncommon to see like a mom, a dad, and like 3 kids all crammed onto a little scooter. And it was just cool to see like how much the parents love their kids and how tight all the kids are together, and just great community. One house that I lived in would flood like whenever it rained too much. And so when it would flood, we'd just open up the back door and the front door, and we'd take brooms and we just kind of let the water flow through our house. A person that lived in the house before me, he was a big American as well, and he climbed up on the roof for some reason, and one of his feet broke through the ceiling right above my desk where I worked. And so when it would like rain, it would always get all my stuff wet. And so we eventually had that repaired, but that was pretty fun. I think public transportation was fun. A lot of times you'd be on like one of their little buses. Here in the US, maybe you'd fit like 6 people in the car, but they would pack in like 16 people, none of which you know. And so that was fun, just to be in close quarters with the Indonesian people. Food over there is like $1 for a full plate of delicious food. So like probably like 1/10 of what it is here in the States. We would just eat out every meal at these little restaurants, which was a lot of fun. Being able to just like eat well on what in America like wouldn't get you as good a food. We could live on a few $100s a month and live very, very well. The exchange rate in Indonesia is like 15,000 rupiah to $1. And so like $100 is like almost 2 million rupiah. So it was fun to be like a millionaire for part of my life. So Indonesian culture is starkly different than what we have in the US for sure. Although Indonesia is not like an Islamic country, there is majority Muslim influence. And I think like they get a bad reputation sometimes, but the reality, at least in Indonesia, is that they are so kind and like really good, faithful people. And so 5 times a day, you always get to hear their call to prayer to sholat. And so just like on all these loudspeakers, you just like hear this cool like call to prayer. And even at like 4 in the morning, you'll get woken up and you'll look out and there will be like these like elderly people shuffling to the mosque to pray. And that's like happening 5 times a day, every day. Also, they have like a lot of religious holidays that are very different. There's one that's like a sacrifice day. And so the day before you see like all of these cows and sheep and whatnot in the streets. And then sacrifice day comes and the next day, none of those animals are there anymore. But we got to witness that. And it was like not wasteful. They would sacrifice them with like their religious rites or whatever. And then they would give the meat out to the community and share it. And so it's like everything that they do, I feel like, is very community oriented. Also, style is a lot different. A lot of it's influenced by like Islamic clothing, where men wear like the longer, baggier pants. They'll have like the wraps. Men will wear like a wrap around their waist, which here like is more of like what a girl would wear, like a skirt. Over there, it's like something that a man wears. It's religious clothing. Women cover their faces and their heads, so they wear like hijabs, where they can just see their face. And that's another one of their like religious beliefs, that's something they need to do. Some will even cover with a burqa everything except for their eyes. And so you see that a lot. They're very like modest people, very respectful of each other, of their families. There's just people everywhere all the time, and people are very comfortable with that. Culturally very different than here, but great. A lot of people in Indonesia have this belief that like because Indonesia isn't as well known in the world, the people there like aren't, I don't know if this is the right way to say that, but like not as special. But I would say that the people there are like some of the best people in the world, even if they're like undiscovered. They have like some of the most beautiful architecture. Some of them have like really great work ethics. Some of them are just like really selfless. And I think that should be recognized. I think there's just like a lot of good people in Indonesia. One time we had to go for a visit and it was raining a ton and flooding. And so we were on our bikes like up to our knees, almost our whole bikes were underwater. We were just very slowly, kind of like on little boats, just like making our way through the very thick water. One of the coolest places I went, it's this safari, kind of think like Jurassic Park. You like, some gates open, you go and it closes behind you, another gate opens and you're in a car, and just like your own personal vehicle. So like they don't give you like any like special vehicle. And then you go through the next gate, it closes behind you, and then you're just in like a huge cage with like lions. And then you go through another one of those breaks, and then there's like tons of tigers, and then the next one's bears, and the next one's like buffaloes, stuff from all over. Elephants. When there were zebras and like safer animals, there would be signs for you to roll down your windows, and you could like feed them carrots through the windows. So that was for sure like one of the coolest things. As far as like animal rights activists, some people I know don't like those type of things, but it was pretty cool to see, once in a lifetime experience for sure. I love zoos in Indonesia because they're like, not like here where you can't really get close to the animals. In Indonesia, the fences are like much smaller and you feel like you could like touch the animals, like little chain link fences. At least the zoos I went to. And a lot of the zoos would have like elephant riding, or like you could hold snakes or whatever. And I never actually rode an elephant, but there were tons of places that I could have and probably should have. Because Indonesians have indigenous elephants, Sumatran elephants, so that's kind of cool. There are so many good foods in Indonesia. I think fried duck is probably like my favorite. There's this place called Bebek Sinjai in this island called Madura, and it's like world famous. And there's like 500 seats in the restaurant, and all they serve is duck. And there's a reason, because it's so good. To try to stay healthy, we weren't supposed to eat things like snake or dog, but those are like big cuisine. Some people eat horse, so like you name it, they'll probably eat it. Intestines are big. I ate intestines a few times, and like liver, and they'll make you sick just because they're different. Sometimes they're not like prepared in a way that we're used to. So there's some variety. Yeah, lots of fruits and things that you've never seen before that we don't have here, but that are totally delicious. They love their spices, especially spicy foods. Chicken is big, rice. I actually really like the cuisine there. Something called sambal. It's kind of like salsa, but it's just peppers, so not as many of like the other types of vegetables that kind of dilute the spiciness, so just pure spicy. So that was an adjustment at first. I remember the first few months I would eat and my eyes would be watering and my nose would be running and I'd be miserable and like just basically crying in a little restaurant. But over time, I grew to not only realize that spicy food can taste good, but it can actually be really delicious. Something called rendang. It's like this meat that's marinated in like a bunch of spices for like a week or something. It just like really seeps in. Martabak, it's this dessert that they make that is super good. It's essentially just like a thick pancake that they drizzle sweetened condensed milk over and put chocolate and cheese and stuff on, but it's super good, way good. I think that if somebody opened a martabak restaurant here, they could probably be pretty successful. Other dishes, satay. is super good. It's just like little pieces of meat on these sticks that they just kind of like barbecue. And there can be chicken or goat or various things, and that's super good. They're not like big into sweets, except for like martabak manis and a few other things, but they like putting like cheese. They don't put cheese on other types of food, but a few of their desserts they'll put cheese on, but not on like normal dinners. It's different cheese too. It's not like cheddar cheese. I don't know. It's like a white cheese, but it's okay. Rainy season, the mornings always start without a cloud in the sky, and it's so sunny and warm and seems so nice. But then some of the people I worked with would like refuse to bring rain jackets because it didn't look like it was gonna rain, but then it always would. But something that was pretty crazy that I loved was whenever we'd travel by car, we'd get to go through like the different forests and jungles and see the volcanoes and things. And I just loved how beautiful all of that was. I remember one day we went to this little island, Gua Creo, and on the island there's a bunch of monkeys. And so we went there and the monkeys were like very friendly and like new tourists. And so they would like try to like swipe your stuff. They took somebody's bottle of tea and like they could unscrew the lid and drink it. And it was just fun to be so close to so many monkeys and like playing with them. So I got some cool pictures. So also in Indonesia, I got to go to the Maluku island chain, and we like visited a bunch of really cool islands, and we went to the little Nira island chain, I think is what it's called. And in the Banda Nira island chain, there's like 8 islands, like 6 of them are inhabited, and for a total of like 10,000 people or less, so pretty sparse. And we would take little boats from island to island, just like little tiny boats on the open sea. And that was wild because we'd get like so seasick after like 4 hours just getting sloshed around on the waves. But a lot of fun. Even just to get there, we took an airplane that sits like 12 people. So that was pretty cool to fly in like a little airplane. One of the islands, not inhabited, but it's a big volcano just coming out of the ocean. I think it's like 1 kilometer tall above the ocean and like 3 kilometers below the ocean. So it's like one of the tall, like 4 kilometers, it's one of the tallest volcanoes, just a lot of it's underwater. And we were able to hike to the peak of that, and that was really cool to see like steam coming out of the ground and be on an active volcano. Snorkeled a lot around those islands and volcanoes, and there's just all sorts of amazing fish and things to see. Biggest culture shock on arriving to Indonesia was definitely just coming out of the airport and just being hit by like this wave of humidity. The first place I lived is kind of a suburb of Jakarta, which is the capital, super populous. And I lived in a city called Bekasi, and Bekasi is like very, very populated. Everything is just like cemented over, not a lot of plant life, very packed, people everywhere. Public transportation's crowded, traffic all the time, like open sewers, things like that. Like instead of like underground sewage, a lot of times it was just like open troughs. That was new and different. And then how people dressed, the language obviously was a huge difference. All of those things were shocking when I first arrived, but within a few weeks I grew to love those things too. So sports in Indonesia, coming from America, I loved basketball, and we have like the NBA, the National Basketball Association. But in Indonesia, basketball is a very like marginal sport. Not a ton of people play it. In Indonesia, soccer is big, especially indoor soccer, futsal on like small indoor courts. We'd play that a ton. And the Indonesian people, some are really good at soccer or futsal, so that was a lot of fun to play. They also love badminton. I think that's like the national sport that they take a lot of pride in. I know they've won like 1 million gold medals, which is pretty cool. And I got to play badminton a few times, and like some of the people I played with were so good. They would like hit the birdie between their legs like every time and just like destroy me. And it was a lot of fun to play badminton. Anyway, sports there are so fun, especially soccer and badminton. So animals in Indonesia, and so just in the cities, there's not a ton of like big animals other than just like people's pets. I mean, there are lots of like stray cats. A few people have dogs. You'll see like the occasional like pig or horse or goat, but not a ton of that type of stuff. But then you go to the zoos and you see like all sorts of cool things. The orangutan is really cool. Their arm span's like 7 feet, and they're just huge animals, like 200 pounds, orange fur, big round faces, kind of like a dinner plate, which is pretty cool. I loved orangutans. I did go to one island that had this marsupial. I think Indonesians call it a couscous or something, but it's like, it looks like a giant rat, but it has like a pouch and it lives in trees and has big eyes, and that was kind of cool to see. I know that in parts of Indonesia there are like elephants and tigers and rhinos and all those things, but we didn't see those in the city very much, if at all. Monkeys, I guess we did see monkeys in the city sometime, but usually those were like chained up or domesticated as well. So Indonesia, they have, at least in Western Indonesia, they have a pretty good network. Western Java, they have a good network of trains from like all the cities connecting them. And the trains get to where there are just so many people traveling to and from Jakarta, which is kind of like just the epicenter where a lot of stuff happens. And you'll be on a train and there are so many people that you're literally holding your bag above your head and packed on all sides with people. And the train like literally could not fit another person in. There are people that are squeezing in and then the doors close and certain people can't even fit and they just have to wait for the next train. So that happened a lot, where we would just have to jump on the train as fast as we could. And occasionally some of our buddies that'd be traveling with us would get left behind and they'd have to catch the next train. And so that happened pretty regularly. Most of them were air conditioned, but you'd be on the train for like 2 hours. You could almost relax because there were so many people packed around you. You could kind of just like float on top of all the people, but it was just so tight and pretty uncomfortable. We took buses a lot as well for the longer trips, and a few times on buses as well. I remember a 6-hour bus ride where I had to stand the whole time in the aisle, and the ceiling was low, so I was like hunched over for 6 hours. So yeah, I mean, public transportation moves a lot of people around in Indonesia, way more than in the States. Indonesia, and most of the big cities where I lived, they would have something called the Carefree Day, and it's like Sunday mornings they'd block off the city centers and just let people come ride their bikes or go on walks or exercise. And I enjoyed that a lot. It was really fun on Sunday mornings just to like get out with the communities and see tons of people interacting in positive, healthy ways. I don't know if that's the case in like all cities, but in a lot of the cities I was in, Sunday mornings were just like this special community time. And I thought that that was a pretty positive thing. Voting day, I don't know if this is national elections, but for sure local elections, people would go vote and they'd dip their finger in ink, like basically permanent ink, or at least ink that would last for a couple days. And if they had dipped their finger, then they couldn't vote again. And so that was like the security to ensure that people didn't vote twice. So that was cool as well to see people involved in like their local government. Indonesia does try to be fairly democratic, and I think a lot of people care about the good of the country, which is cool. There are a lot of very like national people, especially on Independence Day. Indonesia's only been around for like a little over 70 years as a country, and so it's like relatively new. Some of the older people like remember when they won their independence, and so that's really cool. They celebrate and play all sorts of fun games on Independence Day. We do like sack races, like get 3 people inside a sack and like race another team of 3 people, just like fun different things. I think they even mandate, most cities or maybe the whole country mandates you like fly a flag on Independence Day, an Indonesian flag. So that was cool as well, just to like be part of that and like fly our own Indonesian flags. Indonesian history, they were colonized by the Dutch for like 300-400 years, a long time. And then World War II, the Japanese came in and for a few years colonized Indonesia as like an imperial country. But then the US helped Indonesia win its independence, and a lot of like Indonesian heroes fought in those battles as well. Japan was the last country that like came in as an imperial nation and took over Indonesia. Mostly just because Indonesia was like very rich in oil and other natural resources that they needed for the war and for growth. Indonesians eat rice with like every meal. They say if you haven't eaten rice, you haven't eaten. And so like bread and milk that we drink more here in the States is like pretty foreign to them. Fried rice is super good over there. We love fried rice. They have something called krupuk, but it's basically like somehow they take fish and they like blend it up or something and like as a paste, and they like make these very like intricately shaped balls and like almost like little plates out of these fish, and then you'll like eat it with rice or with your soup or whatever else you're eating. Sometimes they're like little chips as well. I think they're usually fish based, but they come in like all different colors because they'll dye in different colors, and they're pretty good that way. The street type food, there'd be street vendors that could either have like little restaurants set up or like push restaurants. There were also like slightly more expensive restaurants that were like walk-in places that were really delicious as well. To me at least, a lot of the street vendors, the food just tasted way better than like the more expensive nice restaurants. I don't know if they just have like the magic touch, but that was something we found a lot. In most of our houses, there would be people that would go by in the mornings or like throughout the day selling ice cream or breakfast or other things, and so we could just order from them and eat that food, which was really nice, so we didn't have to go out and get food. So learning Indonesian, I came to Indonesia with like 6 weeks of language study under my belt, so not really a lot, just like basic sayings. And a lot of what we learned was more formal than what people speak on the streets anyways, and so it was a big learning curve. When I arrived, I was partnered with somebody who was from Indonesia, from Medan, and so he obviously spoke fluently and he was able to help me some, but it was mostly just like this immersive chance to just try to speak with everybody that I met. And then over time I would start to like pick up on the different ways of speaking. In English we have like different tendencies. In Indonesia there's like a whole different structure of tendencies. And so if I heard a word I didn't know or a phrase I didn't know, I'd always like write it down, and then I'd make flashcards and learn them later. And so that was the big thing, just like increasing my vocabulary, and then trying to like go out on a limb and like say things or like use parts of speech that I thought should be used a certain way. And then 2 or 3 months in, I got to where I could understand fairly well, and then maybe like 8 months in, speaking it every day, I got to where I felt very comfortable speaking and explaining abstract ideas, past, present, future, all those things. But the language, fortunately, its tenses and things are really simple, and so that helped. The difficult thing was that there are so many local dialects that influence the language that you had to learn a pretty big vocabulary. Ya, jadi di Indonesia, saya pikir orang-orang di sana mungkin tidak seperti dihormati dengan keistimewaan mereka, tetapi mereka sama berharganya dengan negara yang lain. Misalnya di Amerika Serikat, orang-orang di sini mungkin tidak mengetahui Indonesia dengan begitu banyak, tetapi sebenarnya orang-orang di sini sama berharganya dengan orang-orang di Indonesia. Saya percaya bahwa orang di sana benar-benar istimewa. Mereka punya keluarga yang kuat dan mereka ingin memelihara lingkungan yang baik juga dan yang menerima.